Hey everyone, my name is John Conway. This is week 5, and I'm going to be talking about policy, governance, resource allocation, and self-determination. Specifically, I will address issues facing rural, remote, northern, and aboriginal communities in terms of policy development and what can be done to fix these issues. Rural, remote, northern, and aboriginal communities make up 95% of Canada's landmass. These areas sustain urban areas through the provision of natural resources that are the main source of Canada's economy, as well as through the availability of green space and recreational opportunities for urban populations. These communities are diverse in social, geographic, and economic characteristics. These types of diversities need to be taken into consideration when developing policy. Rural health needs are different from those in urban areas, and people throughout rural Canada have expressed serious concerns about their inability to obtain the health services they need. The poor health status of rural Canadians is not a result of a few specific causes. Rather, it is closely linked to a range of personal, social, economic, and environmental factors and conditions that influence health, such as income, employment and working conditions, education, personal health practices, and the physical environment. One thing that connects all of these issues is the local economy. Once the economy dies, the other issues described start to take effect. There is a mass exodus of people leaving to find work elsewhere. This leads to a situation where there is less of a need for local schools and essential services such as hospitals and clinics. The major issue facing rural communities in shaping their community is their lack of capacity to influence policy and program development, because policy is often influenced by an urban bias and a lack of sensitivity to their needs and uniqueness. Facing out-migration, rural communities are seeing their populations shrink, followed by the loss of essential services. This in turn is forcing more people to leave and thereby creating a vicious cycle. Urban communities are being much better endowed with financial and human resources. This allows them to more effectively get the attention of provincial and federal governments in Canada. This has created a policy agenda that is focused on the urban population. These types of policies do not necessarily work for rural and remote communities. In the last 2 decades, the economies of rural and remote communities have been affected negatively by economic globalization compared to urban areas. Rural regions have historically had higher concentrations of semi-skilled and unskilled workers who bear the brunt of negative consequences of economic globalization. There have been many instances in Newfoundland and Labrador of this issue. Towns have been hit hard by the closure of paper mills and mines. Many of these towns rely solely on one of these major industries as a means of employment. In response to these issues, policies are being created in a broad context to try and fix this situation. The issue here is that the cultural and economic diversity of rural Canada make it difficult to create a blanket policy to address these issues. A policy may work in one locale, but may lead to disastrous results in another. It is important to take into consideration the context in each community and how to fix local economic issues. In Canada, we have traditionally tried to foster rural and regional development primarily through the use of a traditional approach through a wide variety of economic instruments such as economic subsidies and job creation activities. These types of blanket policies have not always been effective. They tend to be band-aid solutions that do not address the root causes of issues rural communities face. They tend to be developed as a one-size-fits-all policy and do not address the needs faced by individual communities or regions. They have failed to reduce regional disparities significantly and have not been able to help individual lagging regions to catch up. Government is turning to using innovation and community economic development or place-based policies as a means for long-term development and growth for rural areas. Regions and communities have diverse and specialized local resources, as well as networks of community-based organizations that exist in them and serve them. These methods create economic opportunities and enhance the social and environmental conditions of communities. These approaches include local ownership of resources and environmental stewardship. Sometimes rural communities are underestimated for their ability to adapt to the globalized economy. This innovative approach includes multi-sectoral partnerships and collaborative working arrangements across economic sectors and among government, community, private, voluntary, educational, and other partners. It creates a more horizontal form of governance rather than a traditional top-down approach. Increased citizen engagement, as opposed to mere citizen consultation in policy process development, is important to ensuring that proper policies are developed to meet the needs of citizens in rural Canada. Not only do communities need to be engaged in initial development of policy, but they also need to be included through the entire policy development cycle, from need identification, formulation, and implementation, through to evaluation. One of the challenges political decision makers have is making policy for contexts which they are often unfamiliar with or have never experienced. An example from Newfoundland of a tool used to catch the attention of policymakers was a documentary that was filmed on Fogo Island to illustrate how their way of life was literally disappearing. The video not only shared information, but it portrayed Fogo's issues and humanized interventions in a meaningful manner. The film engaged local stakeholders in the production of a documentary that illustrated islanders' unique way of life, their cultural history, and their connections to the land. This process also generated ideas for rebuilding their economy and thereby remaining on Fogo Island. The film was successful in creating a dialogue with federal and provincial policymakers. It fostered a facilitative communication between the town and decision makers and assisted in making decisions that were more responsive to the circumstances Fogo was facing. As a result, a fishermen's cooperative was developed that allowed Fogo Islanders to remain competitive with international fisheries. Today, the island is thriving again. It has developed a philanthropist-like economy with the development of a world-class hotel that now attracts visitors from around the world. This particular video is able to inform and provide a better understanding of the context of the issues Fogo Islanders faced, by taking just information and turning it into a story as to how people's lives are being affected. It was this heightened sense of awareness and understanding that allowed policymakers to develop policies that will work for Fogo. Establishing a proper dialogue between communities and policymakers is key to ensuring the context of what a community is facing is properly understood. Fogo Island is an example of how communication, as well as creating a horizontal form of governance, can help to make a community prosper. Giving communities the opportunity to implement strategies and initiatives in order to take charge of their own development plays an important role in addressing their specific needs. Communities need to be given the opportunity to identify problems and issues, set goals and objectives, and develop and implement strategies and initiatives, and take charge of their own development, with assistance from upper levels of government. Given the opportunity to prosper, rural, remote, and Aboriginal communities can attract future investments, retain their population, and stop the outflow of their essential services. Thank you.